In 1953, Rolex set out to create the first real dive watch. Following a challenge from the company's founder Hans Wilsdorf, the end result of that conversation was the first Rolex Submariner, specifically the reference number 1604 and 1605. These were real tool watches that were meant to be taken on real dive missions, and the end results were astonishing. It was this revolutionary design that led to what we know today as the Rolex Submariner.
Hey there watch lovers, Laz here with a hands-on review on the Steeldive 1954. Specifically the reference number SD1954, which is reminiscent of the Rolex Submariner from 1954, which is what this watch is paying homage to. But in my opinion, this watch takes a lot of key element designs from other Rolex Submariners. Specifically the Rolex Submariner Homage. And we'll talk a little bit more about that throughout this video. For now, let's go ahead and jump right into the specs. Alright, so we'll kick it off with the movement on this watch. So this watch is, it's featuring the iconic Seiko movement, and that is the NH35A. You have a power reserve with that movement of about 41 hours. It's rated with a beat frequency of about 21,600 beats per minute. You also have a accuracy rating of -20 seconds plus 40 seconds per day. In my opinion, I think this movement, well, not in my opinion, this is a proven fact, this movement can be calibrated to be more accurate. Now, in these cases of these micro brands, you typically, they don't put much into calibrating them. They just smack them into the watch as the way they come from the factory. I would have loved to have seen a bit of tweaking with this because it's not as accurate as I would like it to be. But nonetheless, it's still accurate enough to keep good timing. And I still think it's a great movement overall. So we'll get into the case. So they're using, for the materials on this case, they're using the very common in the industry as a 316L stainless steel for the case. You have a case dimension of 41 millimeters with the lug width, or a lug to lug length of 48 millimeters. So it's gonna wear fairly big for some of those who have smaller wrists. You also have a case thickness of 13.5 millimeters, which I think is pretty good all things considered. You have a lug width of 20 millimeters, so it's gonna be fairly easy to get some straps to this watch. And in my opinion, these divers are strap monsters. So if you're into the straps, you're gonna love putting some straps on this, some leather straps, give it that vintage vibe. Or maybe even some rubber straps. As for the bezel, you have 120 click unidirectional bezel, and I gotta say, my experience with this watch so far in terms of this bezel, it's A1. I mean, it's up there with bezels like Seiko. Even the Invictus, believe it or not, have some pretty decent bezels. They tend to be a little bit too much resistance on those bezels, but this one has perfect amount of resistance on the bezel. There is zero to no play at all. I mean, once you set this bezel into place, it is not moving and it is perfectly aligned. You do have a ceramic bezel insert with applied lume. Now, this is where it gets interesting with the specs on this. They went with BGW9 Blue Lume on this. That is a Swiss-made lume, and I gotta say, the lume on this really gives my Seiko Turtle a run for its money. I mean, this thing is excellent. As for the water resistance on this watch, it has a rating of 200 meters. That's only 100 meters less than what Rolex or the Rolex Submariner has. Now, keep in mind it is not undergoing the same vigorous testings that Rolex put their watches through, but looking at the construction of this watch, looking at some of the measures that they have taken to ensure that water resistant, I feel pretty confident in stating that this watch is going to hold up to that 200 meters. You have an outer O-ring, which is not common in these micro brands. They typically just have the screw down crown, and that is it, with a seal in the inside of that crown. So in my opinion, I think this is going to hold up fairly well, but keep in mind to take that with a grain of salt, because this is a micro brand. You do get a screw down crown. You also have a screw down back. It is not an exhibition back, and you know what? I'm happy to see that they did not go with that and kept it true to the original design that Rolex has. And let me tell you, if there's any movements that should be displayed because of how beautiful the finish is Rolex movements. But they don't do that. Rolex is always keeping in mind that those watches are tool watches, and you know, they ensure that that back has no compromising materials in the back, such as even putting a sapphire on there. You know, that's another component that you would then have to worry about when it comes to the water resistance. Now we'll jump into my take on this watch. You know, overall, like I was saying earlier, this watch does take a lot of inspiration from the Rolex Submariner 1954. But in my opinion, I think that what Steeldive was trying to accomplish here, they were trying to take the best of Rolex and then put out a product that was affordable to the mass audience of watch collecting, and I think they did a very, very good job. You know, this watch is actually, in my opinion, a lot closely reminiscent of the Rolex Submariner, specifically the 16800 and the what's that other one? It has the Comex on the dial, the Comex logo. I'll jump back to that as soon as I remember that reference somewhere, or put it up somewhere here on the video. Now, that watch was produced from 1988 to 1989. It is, to my understanding, Rolex only made that watch, or only supplied that watch, not to the mass market, but to the to only Comex diving personnel only. So that is what made that watch so highly desirable by collectors, or sought it out by collectors, and that's what really drove the prices up on that particular model. Now, when looking at some of the other designs on this that I think they could have did a better job with, you know, even though, again, they're trying to pay homage to that Comex design, they still kept the modern design in mind, and that's why I think they went with the 41 millimeters, which, you know, when I first seen the specs of this and when I seen it on their website, I was like, 41 millimeters, and I even had notes to talk about that I would have preferred seeing this at 39 to 40 millimeters tops. But I gotta say, this 41 millimeter does not feel like a 41 millimeter. This really feels like a 39 to 40 millimeter watch. Now, even though it's kind of big, at 48 millimeters lug to lug, I still think it's a very wearable watch for me. In some cases, if you have a smaller wrist, then you may find yourself feeling that this is a little bit too big for you. It's also a little bit top heavy, so on occasions I kind of feel that it kind of wobbles back and forth on the wrist. So either way, I like to wear my watches adjusted to the wrist. I don't like too much slack on the links. I don't like my watch bouncing back and forth like it's a bracelet. This is a well-constructed timepiece. Steeldive knocked it out of the park with this watch. You know, they were able to balance the value versus the price and did an excellent job with it. They still managed to use premium materials like sapphire, AR coating on the crystal, BGW9 lume. The bezel on this watch is, I mean, in my opinion, I think it's perfect. You know, for the price, it's kind of hard to ask for more. And you know, when it comes to the bezel and lume, those are two things that are typically corners that are cut by other brands. You know, Pagani Design being one of them. Their bezels are terrible. Their lume is, I mean, they might as well not even add the lume on there. So when you consider these things and the price of which Pagani Design is listed at versus the Steeldive roughly around the same price, you know, I mean, take it, you know, pick your poison there. But I think, in my opinion, Steeldive is a much better watch. Overall, I think, you know, again, Steeldive really did an excellent job with this, and I do love the fact that Steeldive has a wide catalog. I mean, there are so many watches that they have to offer. you know, their lineup seems to be focused more so around homages. I would really like to see something a little bit more unique from Steeldive, something with maybe even a higher end Miyota movement or even a Swiss movement, even if that means that the price is going to be in that bracket of $400 to $500. I think that'll allow them to reach out to a wider spectrum of customers and collectors, and I think that, you know, that would allow the company to grow. So with that said, Steeldive, you know, hopefully you guys are working on something that's unique to your brand, and I would love to get my hands on that if that is the case, even if it's a prototype. Hit me up. Now, as I've already mentioned, the NH35A is a workhorse of a movement. I'm happy with the performance of that movement, but again, it's something that we're seeing in every single micro brand. I would really like to see someone do something a little bit different. So, you know, again, a higher end Miyota or maybe even a entry-level Swiss movement would be nice to see. But, you know, I'm no marketing expert, so, you know, you guys decide. But in my opinion, if you had something like that in your lineup, I would be very interested in getting my hands on that. All right, so let's cover the pros and cons of this watch. So we'll start off with the pros, of course. Just overall, everything they've done with this watch. You get a sapphire crystal with AR coating, a spectacular 120 click unidirectional bezel with zero play whatsoever. I mean, there is no play at all on this bezel. You get a ceramic bezel insert. You have the NH35A movement within this watch, which, you know, in my opinion, you can't go wrong with that movement. The dial, you know, they did a spectacular job with this dial using that matte finish. There is no this is more so, I mean, it's identical to how Rolex did it back in 1954. So I think they did a really, really good job there paying homage to that watch. Solid end links, which is gonna also tie back with the cons, but we'll get to that. The O-ring for the added water resistant. I mean, that is something that you typically don't see in a watch at this price range. And, you know, overall, you know, again, that list of pros outweighs the cons on this watch. So this is a highly recommended watch in my books. As for the cons, you have the bracelet. This is a pretty bad bracelet, but again, if you're going to cut back on something, let it be the bracelet, because this is something that you can later on replace. And in fact, maybe even if you just replace the clasp on this, which, by the way, Steeldive made it easy for you to replace the clasp on this. So well done there. If you replace the clasp on this, then you have a wearable bracelet, but there's still a little bit of rattle with this bracelet, and that's probably in part because of the push pins that they're using for this. They're fairly cheap push pins, so there's a bit of play in between the pins and the actual slots they go into on the links. So maybe you can get away with replacing those push links or those push, I don't know what you call them, but those little pins, and maybe you have yourself a winner with this bracelet. The logo. So the logo is something that, it's not that I hate it, it's just I don't understand what's going on with it. I don't know if it's a scuba diving kit. I don't know if it's a ninja. There's just too much going on there. And again, with the logo, that has to be something that, you know, you really put a lot of thought into, because you got to remember that's the first thing that gravitate consumers to your products. So I think they can probably tweak that logo a little bit to make it a little bit more understandable. I mean, it's just all over the place. The spring bars. So the spring bars on this watch is terrible. Highly recommend you replace the spring bars when you get this. I do not trust the spring bars on this. I think the spring bar is just it's flimsy. You can see the solid end link moving, and that just doesn't give me a sense of security in terms of this watch on the wrist. You know, at any point in time, those spring bars can give out on you, and wow, there goes the watch. And that has happened to me before. So yeah, there you have it. Those are the pros and cons. I highly recommend this watch. I think this is a great timepiece at the price of about 120 bucks, which is what I paid for this watch. Now it gets even better. Steeldive, currently, I don't know, sorry about the background noise, but someone's mowing the lawn. Anyways, Steeldive, currently right now, as of today, as of filming this video, Steeldive is doing, if you mention in the comments when you place your order, if you mention free strap, they're actually including a free strap with your purchase. And in my opinion, I think this is probably going to be better than the bracelet. I'm not a fan of these kind of straps because, oh no. Yeah. Anyways, I have the strap. I'll show it to you here in just a sec. All right, so I'm back. This is actually the strap that they include with their watch, and I just realized I put the strap on backwards, or did I? I don't know. This is confusing. Anyways, this is a strap that they include. It's not a bad strap at all. It's a fairly cheap one, but yeah, this is what they include with the, and see if I can get you a close up there. Yeah, thank you to the guy mowing the lawn. Anyways, that's the strap that they include with this. The buckle on this is it's pretty bad. It's bead blasted, but it feels kind of plasticky, so I'm not sure if that's actually metal, but anyways. All right, so there you have it, guys. That's my take on the Steeldive 1954. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you found this helpful, drop a like on this video, drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And Steeldive, if you're interested in sending me a watch for review, come on, send it over. I'll be more than happy to get my hands on it and do a review on it. I've actually been looking at their pilot watches and their Seiko Turtle Homages, the Captain Willers. So yeah,